Oh yeah, fun announcement from the robot voice. All right. So yeah, no, just to start, if you wanted to introduce yourself, I'd love to just begin like that.
Sure. I'm JJ Perez from Inside Runner Sports. I cover UTSA athletics for the 247 Sports Network. Been doing this since the beginning of football here at UTSA. So excited to be on. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm very happy to have you on. This week is obviously a pretty big game. I'm going to start actually with a tweet that you had put out, which is let me read it verbatim. I assume you know which one I'm about to refer to, though. But
There's a lot of tweets. I get them in, so I get it. Got to
I
find
guess.
it.
Well, it doesn't seem like I have it, but it was the one where you said that this week for UTSA is possibly one of the most important games for the entire
Yeah.
year.
Game of the year is what I said specifically, and it's just the way the schedule lines up, right? I think UTSA is started conference play with Temple and Rice, and they're 1-1. They might have felt like they should have been 2-0, but now they have a gauntlet of three really tough games coming up: North Texas, Tulane, and South Florida, and those may be the three top teams in the American this year. And to have those back to back to back is really a tough stretch. Now, what happens this week? It's a rivalry week, right? I
Yeah,
think UTSA may be, or North Texas may be UTSA's biggest football rival. A lot of people will argue Texas State, but I think this is the longest series UTSA has played. So I feel like there's a lot riding on the line for both teams headed into this one.
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, obviously, you just kind of touched on it. There's a longstanding rivalry that dates back to Conference USA days, right? I mean, you've been covering the team for a while. Just how would you kind of describe the rivalry? Obviously, I think it's been more UTSA sided in recent matchups, but just the long history of it. How would you kind of describe that nature of the
Yeah,
rivalry?
yeah, I think intense, right? I don't know that the records mean much. There was a year UTSA was undefeated, nationally ranked, and North Texas probably gave UTSA one of the biggest butt whippings we've seen under Jeff Traylor. Honestly, one of the worst outings that Jeff Traylor team has had. So you just look back, going back, that there's been so many implications with teams potentially playing in a conference title game. I think there was a conference title game in there, right? Or at least a division.
Yep.
And you see what it means and what's on the line. I mean, you look at how well North Texas has played and how bad UTSA has played. But coming off this last week, the roles were kind of reversed. So for me, this is a real pivotal matchup for both teams and could, have implications moving forward on how the rest of the season plays out.
Yeah. Uh, and you mentioned that UTSA has been struggling recently. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that because obviously you have two really contrasting conference games in Temple and Rice, right? You guys lose narrowly 27-21 against Temple, and then you guys blow out, dominate Rice 61-13. Just what is the difference in play? Like, what's happening when UTSA is blowing out these conference opponents versus, narrowly losing?
Yeah, I think the conversation is gonna start and end with the play of the offense, the play of the quarterback, Owen McCown. Production, like how much offense has been produced. UTSA was clicking at a super high level at the end of last season. I think they were among the top 10 in the last six games of 2024 of offensive production, right? Owen McCown was in a zone. He had all of his wide receivers back. And then for whatever reason, this season they just haven't been able to find a rhythm or flow or any consistency. Whether it's injuries at wide receivers or Owen not being able to just click and vibe with his receivers, it's been missing. And one part of the offense that's been really good is the run game, but opponents are starting to stack up against the run. I think that's what we saw against Temple. They didn't have much rushing production, and UTSA honestly let one slip away because they just couldn't do anything in the second half against probably a underrated Temple team. I think Temple's going to end up being a little bit better than everybody thinks they are. They went toe to toe with a really good Navy team this past week, probably should have won. And then this week, they just came out and jumped on Rice. I think the defense knocked out two quarterbacks, and it was just rough. It was rough sailing for Rice. They took advantage. They had big plays, turnovers, played well in special teams. So You're right, a sharp contrast in those first two conference games. The they probably lie somewhere in the middle in between there, but I think the Roadrunners are hoping they could use this last outing to kind of gain some momentum, especially offensively. That's where the questions are.
Yeah. I think this is a really good opportunity. I'm really curious to get your insight. I love how, just in my perspective on UTSA Twitter, how passionate online these people are. After that Temple game, the amount of really, I don't know, disappointed fans there were.
Yeah,
There was a lot of conversation, I understand, about the offensive play calling. There was a lot of
right.
things that put into question. Um, Obviously, after a 61 point win, that might be a little premature, right? Let's say. But just what is your perspective on at least that conversation in terms of offensive coordinator, and if that had anything to do with the loss that you guys are having, or the lack of offensive production you guys are having?
So this season is mirroring last season a lot, where UTSA, I think they started 3-5 and they just didn't look good. In a lot of sorts they were way worse off than
Mm,
they are this season. And they, like I said, they were able to turn it around and have really jaw-dropping offensive stats towards the end of 2024. So it's it's the same offense. It's the same play. It's playmakers. All the returners returned. It's the same key contributors. So they know the formula works. It's just how do they fix what's not working, right? So yeah, I think whenever there's any struggles, the offensive coordinator is the first guy, kind of just like, hey, this guy's not doing well. We don't like all these screenplays. We don't like all these short passes. Why can't we throw the ball down the field? But in reality, for UTSA, I think more questions can be asked about the defense, right? They've given up some long plays. Um, I think they had a 21 unanswered points against Temple in the third quarter week before last. So I it, it's a yin and a yang, right? That this staff has been together a long time. Like Jeff Traylor likes continuity with his coaching staff. His offensive coordinator is a promote from within, from the previous offensive coordinator. So, it's an easy target. I do think there is some fair criticisms with some of the play calling, but honestly, it's quarterback play at this
yeah.
level, right? I feel like as your quarterback goes, so does your offense. And Owen's been pretty accurate, but we've also seen him not be so accurate as well as we know he can be. So a tough kid. He made some great plays this week, and I think he's going to continue to improve the more he plays. He's one of those guys where you got to keep playing and keep having the reps to get better. And I think he gets better, and I think they end up being one of the better offenses this season.
Yeah, absolutely. The difference between those conference games I also want to talk about is, I mean, obviously, I think it's well known in the American that UTSA plays incredibly well at home, right? I think the stat that you had tweeted out was what, 20-0 in conference games since 2020. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? What is the difference, do you imagine, or if that plays any impact at all when you're on the road versus at home?
Yeah, they struggle on the road. There's no doubt. I think it's 21-0 at home in regular season conference games, and then they've
Wow.
had two postseason conference games, um, conference championships. So it's actually 23-0, and it's impressive. They've only lost four games outside of conference games in non-conference, right? So you're talking a 6-year span there against some pretty good teams, and I don't know what it is at home. The environment, the crowd noise, it's loud there. They pick up an energy, and just I think they've faced better teams on the road, maybe, right? You never know how the schedule's gonna draw for you and what you lie ahead. I think when this schedule first came out, it was like, oh hey, they don't play Memphis or Navy, but now it's like South Florida, Tulane's pretty good. Nobody thought North Texas was going to be this good. So, two of those three big games are on the road. So, where do you summon the strength and energy to kind of pull an upset there? I think is a big one. And they're favored at home too, so that goes to the competition level. So I just think some of that's the luck of the draw. And
Huh?
they've been good in close games until recently. They some had a stat, something, I think it was like 40 out of the 71 games were one score possessions in the fourth quarter, and they won 22 of those or 25 of those. So they've won more than they've lost, but not recently. The last two seasons they've struggled there, and some of those have been on the road.
I think it'd be a massive mistake on my part. Obviously, we kind of touched on it in terms of the running game, but I have to ask you just how entertaining it is to watch Robert Henry, run that ball, and just how impactful he's been on this team.
Yeah, he's a special talent, right? I don't know that he was this good last year. He was kind of banged up towards the end of last season, and he thought that was it, right? Then you had that JUCO ruling where if you played in the COVID JUCO rule, you have an extra year. So this is his new lease, right? His new lease on life, and he really transformed his body. He looks a lot bigger. He's probably more muscular than before, and he just has another gear. I don't know where that came from. A lot of a lot of these home run balls you're seeing, they are rushing lanes, but there's a cut or a juke move or something that it's like, holy smokes, look what he just did to that defender, and then he's gone. He hits the edge or he hits the boosters, and a special guy. I think he's an NFL talent, maybe a mid-round guy, and he just special. I do think his numbers will kind of tail off as the season goes because they have been using him a lot early in this season, and there is some health concerns, and you don't want to use them too much. And then honestly, defenses are just going to stack the box, and UTSA hasn't been great passing down the field, and there's gonna have to be a balance there. But yeah, Robert Henry is a ton of fun. Every time he makes a jump cut or he stops and looks for a hole, you almost think he's gonna break free for a long one.
I can't imagine how fun it is. Yeah, seriously, to report on a guy like that. Yeah, so then analyzing that passing game a little bit, we talked a little bit about Owen, but the pass catchers that he has, what is the if it's not the play calling, right? It could potentially be on the quarterback, but then evaluating the receivers as well. How quality of a receiving group do you think UTSA has this year?
Yeah, I think they're okay. They're probably maybe middle of the road of the conference, maybe upper half. There's not a long, deep down the field threat. Like I don't know if there's a guy that Owen could just throw the ball 40 yards in the air and hope they could go up and get that. And I think that's kind of what's missing from
Mm.
this offense. They'll take some shots down the field. Devin McEwen's his number one receiver. He's speedy. He runs all the routes, great hands. He's a really quality wide receiver. And David Amador is kind of a Swiss Army knife. He'll do everything. They got a transfer from Houston Christian last year. AJ Wilson has come in, and I think he's probably the hottest wide receiver at this point of the season. And and then I think they just got DJ Allen back from an injury that's kept him sidelined. I don't know if he's real healthy, but he's got a speed and a dynamic playmaking ability that kind of sets him apart from everybody else. So they have some guys. The problem is for whatever reason, one of them has been banged up or one of them can't practice. So there's no consistency and flow, and sometimes some of the timing goes out the window. So they're very much an offense and a talent where they need to practice and they need to play together for it to kind of all work. So, we've seen it click the last week, maybe last the half of the game before. So how they continue to improve that, I think is gonna see it's gonna reflect how successful they are this season because that's gonna be the biggest thing moving forward is can they get this passing game back to where it was?
Yeah, you mentioned AJ Wilson being like the hottest UTSA receiver right now. You look at the game log; it's like Temple and Rice are the last two games where he's really shown out. I don't know if he missed some time earlier or he just wasn't as involved, but those two games are really where he's been making those big plays. What have you seen from him the last two games?
Man, just a real smart wide receiver, right? UTSA actually played Houston Christian last year, and he kind of lit them up. And it was one of those things like, wow, this guy's pretty good. Maybe he should be on our team. So he actually went into the portal, and UTSA was able to land him. So just a really smart guy, runs really good routes, deceptive speed, great hands. And it's just a matter of him getting open. I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And this level of talent versus the defensive backs is
Yeah.
how do you get open? Like how do you keep going? So UTSA has been pretty good with their offensive line and providing some protection for the quarterback, but in recent weeks they've kind of struggled with that. So it's a yin and a yang. You got to balance the being able to protect with being able to throw the ball down the field. But yeah, I'd say AJ's I wouldn't label him as Owen's favorite target. I think that's still McEwen, but I would say he is probably on an uptick right now.
Understood. There's I want to jump to special teams now because I think that's one of the more fun storylines about UTSA, right? Trailers talked about it where the two kickers transferred this past offseason, and you were left with a walk on and Michael Petro, right? I went to high school with Michael Petro, so I
Oh,
actually know a
nice.
little bit about him.
Yeah.
Small world, right? He's obviously 5 or 6 on the year so far, but I mean, I just think it's a really cool story. Just how has it been for you to cover on the special team side of things?
Yeah, I think yeah, he's done well. I think they were worried about that coming in, right? Because he's a younger guy. He's a walk-on. Like you don't know what to expect. They went out and signed a kicker who's I think he's just kickoff duties is what they do. So they've split kickoff and place kicking duties. And I think, Petro's been pretty good. I think he's maybe earned a little bit more of a opportunity to kick some of these longer field goals. Jeff Traylor's a real aggressive coach. If
Yeah.
if if you're near your midfield and it's fourth and manageable, he's gonna go for it. Last year, he went for it in an Army game at his minus 35 or something, and it probably ended up they didn't convert and probably ended up costing the game, but you could see where the logic comes from because you have to look at kind of how the game flows and what you think is going to be able to win. And oftentimes, especially with the talent in this league, field goals don't cut it, right? So they're trying to score touchdowns, but I do think that unit struggled just overall. Special teams struggled at the beginning of the season, but I do think they've played their two best games the last 2 weeks. I think punt coverage and punt return is doing well. And the same with kickoff and kick coverage. They're like I said, they struggled, but yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, Petro gets a few more opportunities. I think he's earned it. I think he hit a career high 45 yarder last week, so we'll see if he gets any more chances coming up.
Yeah, that's just a great story. I don't think many people consider, the transfer portal and kickers, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's something people talk about. Yeah, and moving at that defense, right? I think Shad Banks Jr. is something that comes up early in the scouting report. If I don't know if I'm going to say the name right, but Nana Aniamlu, right? That's another defensive player on UTSA that I think shows up pretty well. 6 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Shad is leading the team in tackles, 42 tackles, 2 picks, 1 forced
yeah.
fumble. You mentioned that the defense could also need some improvement to really reach their full potential. Just what have you seen from that unit this year?
Yeah, I think Shad Banks is where it starts, right? He was a transfer from a Power Five school, and he's delivered. Like a lot of people had high expectations for him, and week in, week out, he's continually the highest graded defensive player. He kind of leads a really strong line inside linebacker group. They have two or three guys there that have played really really well. So the front seven of the Roadrunners are all pretty deep, and that's something considering. Early in the season there was some questions about where the pass rush was going to come from, and Nana came back from. He's had two ACL injuries in consecutive seasons, and I think a third one overall. He had one when he was at JUCO, so he hasn't played. He hasn't been on the field, and you look at his body, and it's a prototypical, outside rusher, an edge rusher, and he has all the tools and all the talents, but he hasn't been able to put it together because of the injuries. But he's playing well. I think he's still on a limited. They call it a pitch count, but a snap count. So we'll see how much he plays. It's been kind of up and down, but that front seven, they have a lot of guys they rotate in that they like. And UTSA set a record for tackles for loss in a game the last week, and I think it was all spread out. It was two, 1.5, 1.5. So it's definitely by committee. They do a lot of things there well, where they haven't, been as good as in the secondary, right? They've given up some big pass plays. I feel like the cornerbacks unit is had issues with, you know, the number of players available to make big plays, right? And some of that is they've just had to been baptized by fire, and they've gotten a little bit better as the season's gone along. I do think the safeties have also gotten better, but yeah, that's a big question mark for UTSA, their passing coverage, and do think it'll certainly be tested this weekend.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking more on this weekend, how much have you kept up with North Texas? What have you kind of seen from them? And then if I can, I don't know, fill in the blanks at all. And if you have any questions about our North
I
Texas.
do. Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
For me it starts with the quarterback, right? I think
Mm.
it's the story of the American so far is like, where did
Yeah.
this quarterback come from? How does someone who didn't even start from when they were ninth grade or something
Yeah. Yep.
have this kind of production? Where did he come from?
Yeah. So Drew Mestemaker had, previously did not start in his senior or junior years of high school, right? And we know football enough to where that's where you make your name. That's where you're going to get your offers and college interest. And he was behind a Louisville quarterback now and a Baylor catcher, who were both ahead of him both those years at Vandegrift High School, right? Closer to you guys, funny enough. He did closer down in
Yep,
Austin,
yep.
right? And so he just never got an opportunity. He switched to punter and safety. The last time he had started at quarterback was the ninth grade B team. That's where you see everywhere, right? Is that he just hadn't seen a starting chance since back then. And so he knew someone at UNT, just a random connection. And he walked on as like the seventh or eighth quarterback. He won the backup job behind Chandler Morris last year, who's now at Virginia. And after Chandler left, he played in the bowl game. Obviously, lit it up, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. That big 70-yard rush he had, he threw up in the trash can afterwards. That's where he gained most of that notoriety. I think that it's for sure a testament to Drew himself for being that patient and still working on his craft. Right, he didn't get this good from not playing. He was for sure practicing and developing in the background while he wasn't seeing the actual high school field. And it's also a testament to obviously Coach Morris's ability to find quarterbacks, gems in the rough and develop them with his staff. Clearly it's gotten him some interest in some coaching searches. You're familiar with that, I assume, with Trailer
Yep,
and all that.
yep,
So,
yep.
we can talk about that at some point too. But as far as where Drew came from, that's the big story summarized.
I wanted to ask about the offense. Like, what changed from last year to now, right? Because
Yeah.
it wasn't this good, and you look at it. I mean, you look at how North Texas played against South Florida, and that was kind of like a heavyweight matchup, and that first half was blow for blow, as good as a half I've seen offensively from either side. Like,
Yeah.
what changed? I know Eric Morris is a really good offensive coach, and I guess it starts with him, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes, yeah, it for sure starts with him, and I think his focus that he had in this offseason on particularly improving at running the ball, third down and fourth down conversion rates, and the red zone. Right, those were his big four markers across the board offensively. I'm going to call back to again. We talked about it before we started recording, but calling back to the UTSA UNT game last year. Right, obviously UTSA had won by a pretty big margin, but UNT's ability to score was kind of predicated on quick pass, or not quick, not literal quick passes, but quick, like huge touchdown passes, right?
Yeah.
A screen that goes for 80 yards, a throw over the middle of the field that isn't that deep necessarily, but is just designed well enough where you can get a receiver open and just have him run all the way to the end zone, and they'd score in like 2 seconds. Simultaneously, they'd also be unable to sustain drives past 2 seconds, right? So it's either a three and out or an instant touchdown. And
Yeah.
that like inconsistency and that inability to sustain a drive, control the clock a little more, I think took away a lot of the versatility that we're seeing in this offense currently. Um, Morris is a part of that. Mike Leach air raid offense. That it stemmed into so many different coaches, but he's frequently talked about like he's joked before that he's not all the way fully with Mike, where like he doesn't want to pass 50 times a game, preferably. Like if you
Yeah.
can run the
Yeah.
ball, you have to lean into that to balance everything out. So that's why I probably say the biggest difference is that, and I think that Caleb Hawkins is another story for UNT. If you've kept up with him, he's a freshman running back who's from what I've seen, a little similar to Robert, right? Where I think he's a bigger back. He's running through guys.
Yeah.
He's running past people. He's the highest rated prospect by 24/7 to commit to UNT like ever outright. And so you have another running weapon. Last year they suffered like 3 running back injuries, who were just completely out for the entire year. And so you had to rely on a lot of different people that I think made the running game overall worse. But anyways, yes, that's the I think the why this offense has improved.
Yeah, I got one more question for you before you can
Yeah.
get back to asking me questions.
No, I love it.
What's different defensively? Like, what defensive
Oh,
change have you seen?
if you ask fans, it's going to be the big talking point. Sorry, I'll say this. What fans really hated about what is his name? What am I doing? Last year's DC. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, who was fired after the UTSA game,
He was fired.
ironically. Yes.
Yeah, Matt Capone was a DC last year, and the big point that a lot of fans hated was that he primarily wanted to run a 3-3-5 defense, right? Three defensive linemen down front. And what changed? Well, the first year under Capone and Morris's first year in the American, we had the worst defense in the country, right? So that's pretty a low point to start off from. The next year, which is the year that he got fired against UTSA, they allowed. I think they were ninth in total defense, or sorry, ninth from last in total defense. And so there wasn't much improvement, right? You have the worst defense in the country and the ninth worst defense in the country back-to-back years. They went with Coach Cassidy, who I think the biggest thing is that he just brought in a lot of his Conference USA, Sam Houston guys in, right? And a lot of guys who didn't even really see that much playing time at Sam Houston. He brought, I would probably say David Fisher, the cornerback, and Trey Fields, the linebacker, only the two ones. And probably Bryson Hayes on the defensive line. There's probably about 4 players, or 4 to 5 Sam Houston transfers that actually got a lot of playing time at Sam Houston. It was more so like the scheme and culture they brought over. They've been infinitely more successful at producing turnovers. And I think we'll call back to that South Florida game. I think what prevented UNT from being competitive longer in that game is as you saw that game progress, you saw the impact of Byron Brown and that running attack slowly wearing down on that defense, right? And so I think they for sure have the pieces and the scheme to produce 3 turnovers just in the first quarter, right? But in terms of really hanging in with a really talented South Florida team for entire 4 quarters, that second half was drastically different because I just think that they don't have enough depth. They don't have enough guys to keep cycling in on that defensive line and just across that whole defense.
Yeah, that's a really good South Florida team, though. I think you could see how much they invested tangibly in that roster, and I do think they're maybe the top. I know Memphis is up there, but I do think they're going to end up being at the very top of this league.
Yeah, golly, the American's it's gonna play out a little weird. Obviously UTSA is 3-3, right? So I think y'all's road to the conference championship is a little more blurry. It's a little more difficult, but is that still a conversation amongst fans? That's still possible, and I understand it must be somewhat possible, right?
I don't know that the fan base has that much faith in the Roadrunners, right? Because honestly, the way the season started, how the team has looked, they looked really good against Texas A&M to open the season, but after that, they've had more ups and downs and questions, and even in some of the wins, right? I think they're coming off their most complete game where they've played in all 3 phases. I think inside the facility, they believe they have a shot to compete with everybody on the schedule, and I do think they're hopeful to make the conference championship game, but I don't know that you're going to see a 2-loss team in that game, right? So every game is going to be the biggest game just because of that. So I do think the fan base is more, hey, can't get us to 6 wins. We make sure we're bowl eligible. You're talking about a program that 2 years ago hadn't won a bowl game, and now they've won 2. So I think that's still a significant feat. 6, 7 wins isn't a bad season, but if you were hoping for maybe 8, 9, or 10, then it is disappointing. So I think that's where you see kind of the different factions of UTSA's fan base.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand, right? Because I mean, I'm looking at the rest of the schedule, and you are right? Even after North Texas, Tulane and South Florida back-to-back is really tough, and then obviously there's Charlotte's, I mean, in disarray right now. But after Charlotte, East Carolina and Army are 2 teams that are still, kind of in that middle of the pack race in the American.
Right.
And I think we've been going for a little while now, so I can just wrap up with this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this year's coaching carousel, right? I think, I know. I feel like obviously I think Coach Traylor has had a little more longer sustained history than Coach Morris, right? Of success and building something in UTSA. And so I understand why his name is everywhere, but this is the first time as a North Texas, writer and all that, I'm seeing Coach Morris in all these headlines too. I don't know. Just, what are your thoughts on the prospect of these American coaches getting these job offers or
Yeah,
theoretically?
it's wild. I think just having done this a few times, uh, the coaching search is exhausting, like from like a reporting standpoint, right? Because
Yeah.
you're trying to find out stuff that people don't want you to know about, or if they want you to know about it, it's for a specific reason because maybe they're negotiating through you. But it's one of those things where it's like it never stops. And for Jeff Traylor, I mean, he's a really good coach, and he's a really good recruiter,
Yeah.
right? So he can recruit anywhere in or around Texas. And you give him more NIL than what he has, and he's gonna do better than half of the guys out there. Now he is a little bit older, right? But you have to think who makes these decisions, right? You're talking about presidents and chancellors and the upper echelons of the schools. And a few years ago, I thought for certain he was leaving for Texas Tech because he has relationships with those people up there. They really like him, but Jeff Traylor didn't want to leave then. So he's committed here. I wouldn't say he's never gonna leave because certainly, you never say never. And if, certain schools come that are gonna pay his buyout, he's got an insane buyout. I think one of the highest, if not the highest in the G5, has got a super long contract. So all of that was done intentionally because they want to keep him here. So I do think he ends up staying, but I wouldn't not be surprised if there's a few tense moments if maybe Baylor comes open, right? You never know. And then for a guy like Eric Morris, a younger guy, kind of like GJ Kinney, I mean, if you're asking me what I'm looking for as a leader of an athletic department, it's someone like that you could rally your base around, rally, trying to it's an NIL arms race now. So you got to rally your boosters into literally buying into success. And I do think Eric's that kind of guy you could say, hey, look at his offense. Look at how exciting it is. Imagine if we had a couple of four-star receivers or some tight ends that could do stuff. Let's give them a big time running back. So yeah, it's a lot, but
Yeah.
from a reporter's perspective, it's exhausting and I don't wish it on anybody, but I do think that this is how it is now. NIL is driving this thing. There are more job openings now than ever before, right? And they're really good jobs, really good jobs. So why wouldn't you take a look at someone who's having a really good season like Eric Morris?
Yeah. Speaking on Coach Trailer, this is my final question. I know the previous one I said my final. Is there any job you think right now that is open that you think would just be a great, like, perfect match for Coach Trailer?
Yeah, I think the Arkansas job's a perfect
Yeah.
match for him. I mean, he was there. I know for a fact that people there love him. I don't know what his relationship is with the current administration. I think that athletic director is maybe on the hot seat themselves, so maybe they have to make more of a splashy hire. I don't think he would leave for Arkansas, but Arkansas, Oklahoma State, those are two pretty established programs that can compete there. I think they could compete given the right resources. That's what it's come down to. How much is their admin gonna pony up for NIL and rev share and all that stuff? But I would keep my eye on those two jobs. Coach Traylor, both of them, he's kind of denied saying he wants to leave. So I believe him.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just have to say that, and people don't believe him. But he's been in this position before, and honestly, he seems so focused and dialed in on trying to right the ship at UTSA this year that doesn't even seem like it's anywhere near his forward thinking. And I do think if a name like Baylor comes open, or if Texas were ever to come open, Texas Tech again, those are obvious schools. But like I said earlier, he's a little bit older now, right? And does that kind of make him less attractive as a candidate, especially when you have younger guys like GJ and Eric out there doing pretty good for themselves?
Yeah. I mean, my gosh, the state of Texas. Tell you what Kenny
Yeah,
Morris Trailer.
yeah,
I've heard Brett Ashley's name in the
yeah.
name for Arkansas.
Right.
Golly. Well, JJ, thank you so much for your time. I'm gonna stop
Hey,
the
thank
recording.
you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, and let me turn this off real fast.